When I was younger, I never truly understood the importance that art could have on a society, and I never really appreciated those school trips I used to go on with classmates. The Getty was one of the places I would go to on a school trip every now and then during elementary and middle school. But as mentioned before, my only belief was that it was another day off and I was often bored throughout the trip. But now that I'm in college and have as a person grown to enjoy art just a bit more, returning back to the Getty, I was then finally able to truly appreciate the works that these men and women had created in the past, and as well finally able to bring some meaning to some pieces that in the not so distant past I would have passed on. The pieces that I will be talking about today are Landscape with the Castle of Massa di Carri by Leo von Klenz and The Road from Versailles to Saint Germain by Alfred Sisley. But before I talk about these awe-inspiring pieces, I would like to lay down some background information about the artists and where they originated from, and later hopefully bring some more meaning to the pieces by using previous explanations of the artist's origin. To begin, I'll talk about Leo Klenz and his life story, and then later on talk about this piece, The Landscape with the Castle of Massa di Carrara. Never has there been, and never will there be, more than one art of building, namely that which was brought to perfection during the epoch of prosperity and civilization of Greece. Leo von Klenz. Leo von Klenz was born February 28, 1784 in Schladen, Germany. When Leo was 19 years old, and before he was an artist, he studied finance and architecture in Berlin with himself and some partners. He would then, a little later on, after finishing his time in the university, go on to work in the courts of King Jerome Westphalia as an architect, designing many incredible buildings, and this is where he had also met his future wife, Felicia Blangini. After that, he would go on to work with Ludwig I, which after some time Ludwig had grown a liking to Leo, and had granted him the ranking of King's Architect. This was an amazing achievement for Leo and his now wife, Felicitas. And so on, Leo was then able to, with this new title, to create works he'd only dream about doing. Leo's work was so good, in fact, that it helped solidify Ludwig as a high-standing noble, and because of this, Ludwig then eventually gave Leo another promotion a couple years later to a royal advisor. Leo's work was successful since he'd used examples from Greek culture as inspiration for his works and styled many buildings and many of his pieces based on that style, which is why also many believe his work to not just be architectural but almost poetic. With how well he was able to keep the original style and not diminish it with some other culture, which is what made Leo's work so memorable and awe-inspiring, since he cut no corners in his works. Leo could work with many others throughout his lifetime and practically worked until he died, which was unfortunately in the year of 1864 in Munich. Why I chose Leo to talk about is simple. He cut no corners and committed to his work 101%, which is why I'm now going to talk about one of his works, Landscape with the Castle of Massa di Carra, which struck a chord with me and hope it does with you. The Landscape with the Castle of Massa di Carra was one of Leo's many pieces which he had created throughout his lifetime. As an artist, this piece shows a beautiful landscape depicting small buildings and olive trees from the countryside of Italy. In this work, Leo was able to convey what life was like for the people at the time throughout his meticulous details. This level of detail was often seen in many of his works throughout his life, including the buildings he had designed, and his piece is not any different from that. He included details such as what the people were wearing and how the trees were drawn, not leaving any details behind for the eye to catch. Leo was also fixated on Greek, Roman/Italian cultures, so this is another reason why this piece was so detailed, not leaving anything for the viewer to imagine. It was plain and simple, beautiful piece of a countryside. And though the artist must remain the master of his craft, the surface at times raised to the highest pitch of liveliness should transmit to the beholder the sensation which possessed the artist. Alfred Sisley. Alfred Sisley was born on October 30th, 1839 in Paris, France. At a young age, Sisley's parents had wanted him to commit to a life of commerce, but as he grew older, he grew a liking to painting. When he was a bit older, Sisley, as an amateur artist, began working with Charles Gray in his studio. but eventually had to flee from his work to the Franco-German War at the time. Because of the war, he fled to London to pursue his career there, but had a lifetime of struggles ahead of him as an artist. But even though his life was full of struggles and hard times, he fully committed himself to his works, which includes such works as St. Cloud, where his level of detail was on par to his idol Camille Corot, who was a big inspiration for Sisley, and that was reflected throughout his palette choices he would use in his pieces, which were often light and very detailed. But although he was very talented, his work would only be recognized after his death in 1899. This, among many other things, is why I chose Sisley as my second artist, because although his life was hard and unforgiving at times, he never gave in and worked through a poverty-stricken life. It is most unfortunate that his work was only recognized after his death, which that's the unfortunate fate for many other artists as well. One of my favorite pieces from Sisley that I was able to view in person would have to be The Road from Versailles to Saint-Germain. For although many view this piece as unfinished or a basic sketch, I see it as not perfect, but balanced. Meaning Sisley was able to balance the realism of the landscape with the plain but impactful details, like how the trees and sky are painted with, quote, impressionistic brushstrokes. And even though Sisley was poverty-stricken his whole life, he was able to create such magnificent pieces such as this through his brushstrokes and his works. Was only recognized as impactful and only after his death, which is once again an unfortunate fact for most artists.